than when the Prime Minister entered Downing Street, the biggest fall in living standards since records began, and real incomes below what they were at the last election. That's their record, and it's got the Prime Minister's name written all over it. Finally, Mr Speaker, disgracefully, there was no mention at all by the Chancellor of infected blood compensation or Horizon scandal redress. The slowness in righting these wrongs is raised here most weeks. The Business and Trade Select Committee's highly critical report out this morning calls for a legally binding timetable to deliver redress to sub-postmasters, taking it completely out of the hands of the Post Office. Does she agree? Given everything the leader has said on both these injustices, does she understand the anger that no new money has been allocated or a timetable given for these compensation schemes in yesterday's budget? Like with other measures, wasn't this omission just another short-term, cynical act, storing up problems for the next government to sort out? As ever, it's party before country, the final acts of a desperate, dying government.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, can I start by just noting that tomorrow is International Women's Day, and I would point out that on most Thursdays the primary players in this session are 3 women and sometimes a 4th in Speaker's chair. It is sometimes noted that in meetings women are often the last to speak, but I would argue that while that might be true, it is also equally the case that we are often the first to set the right tone and approach. Politics needs more of us, and I hope that the spirit of tomorrow will carry into this important political year. Turning to what the Honourable Lady has said about another female colleague of ours, she will no doubt be able to obtain details from the department in some of the questions that she has raised, but I would just remind the House, because what the Honourable Lady says is really probing the character of that Secretary of State. And I would remind this House that when the Honourable Lady was entitled to redundancy payments from being a Secretary of State, she did not, which was £16,000, she did not take that and handed it back to the department because it was the right thing to do. So I would just remind people of that, and I think that speaks volumes about the Honourable Lady's character and how much she values the fact that it is taxpayers' money that we are talking about. The Honourable Lady is channeling Elmer Fudd this morning, I see. Bugs may not have been in the Chancellor's hat, but support for businesses large and small was, help for households was, tax cuts for working people was, help for single-earner families was, and holding down the price of fuel at the pump through another fuel duty freeze was, and we will ensure that that benefit is handed on to the consumer via Pump Watch. I'm not going to take any lectures from a Labour Party on stewardship of public services and getting growth into our economy. No lectures on tax cutting from a Labour Party that still has 28 billion of unfunded spending commitments which can only be delivered through tax rises in its plans. It was the Labour Party that left office with £71 billion in a black hole in the defence budget and equipment programme. It was Labour that brought in the fuel duty escalator and is clobbering the motorist in Wales and in London. It's the Labour Party in Wales that have cut the NHS budget, not once but 3 times, in contrast to the increases we have brought in and the further £6 billion announced yesterday. And it's Labour's NHS budget cuts is one reason why a quarter of the population in Wales are on a waiting list. I'm not going to take any lectures from Labour on council tax, which rose by 104% under their administration, and again in Labour has nearly tripled since they've been in power, while we reform welfare to make work pay, double the personal allowance, cut national insurance, and have protected jobs and livelihoods through furlough. Labour think it's a good use of taxpayers' money to give asylum seekers £1,600 a month. And I'm not going to take any lectures from the Labour Party on supporting those earning least from a party that brought in the 10p rate. The Honourable Lady's rhetoric on growth and modernising our nation does not match her party's agenda to unpick 40 years of trade union reform, tie business in red tape, or sit well with their voting record on minimum service levels for the British public. Nor am I going to take any lectures from a party that did the square root of diddly squat for victims of infected blood and the post office. And on that precise point, the Honourable Lady clearly hasn't read the Red Book. Just on the Horizon scandal on page 24, it commits us to paying full compensation. The estimates are in there, but it also says it will be increased if needed. This is a tough shift. Post-pandemic and mid-war, it is a tough shift, but thank God it is our shift. Our country has turned a corner, and we are going to get back to our inflation target sooner, as the new forecasts indicate. The plan is working, and we are going to stay that course, and we must. Otherwise, we are going to end up back where Labour brought us to. Compared to today, that's 1 million more workless households, 400,000 more children, and 200,000 more pensioners in absolute poverty, 4 million fewer in work, youth unemployment at 45%, literacy rates trailing rather than leading the world, and a third less spending on the NHS. No thank you, Shadow Leader. We're going to stick with the Prime Minister's plan. Further business will be announced.
James Daly. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.